What's up, everybody? It's Spencer Alessi, and this is the Esports Narrative. This is episode 4, and today we're talking with Ramsey Jamoul. Ramsey Jamoul is the CEO of Wichita Esports, which started as a student group at Wichita State University. Now they are an esports startup focused on hosting semi-professional and collegiate video game tournaments. They're building a community that unites a variety of video games such as CSGO, Overwatch, Rocket League, Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, and VainGlory. Ramsey, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where I left out or bits and pieces that I might have messed up, and tell us a tiny bit about yourself.
Definitely. You kind of hit it on the nail. I started out at Wichita State. We had developed our own team for the university and kind of converted into hosting our own events since Collegiate Star League, which we took place in, was kind of barren at the time. That was about 6 years ago. And a lot of teams had forfeited at the time, and the Collegiate League was growing. So we definitely felt the need to kind of step in and host our own events. Luckily, I had a great team behind me that also were interested in doing the same. But not only that, Kansas is by far one of the best places to be in for esports, believe it or not. We have great professionals out here, and then we have so many people just ready to help and do the work that really needs to be done to build up esports from the ground up as it needs to be.
That's awesome. Now, a lot of people that I'm going to talk to on this podcast are going to come from the traditional esports background of maybe it's from the game development side and managing events as far as like the pro leagues go and things like that. You come from a little bit different direction in that you're working with collegiate and semi-pro events. Tell me a little bit about what esports means to you from that sense, from a collegiate and semi-professional standpoint.
Definitely. Esports is so incredible. It's really the social aspect where the audience gets to engage with the players, and I think that's the most important part. The engagement is really what brings around the competitive scene. The players can compete together, but having the fans build that relationship with the players and really grow as a team and a community together, that's what esports means to me. And I think at the collegiate and semi-professional level, it's so much more personal. You have a relationship with somebody in your local community or your local school that you support and that you want to see them go so far. And you actually get to watch them grow and develop as a player, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah, that's something that's really interesting about the collegiate aspect of it is that we're seeing more and more colleges hop on board having actual programs, esports programs around different games. They have scholarships. There's actually organizations that are developing leagues around this thing. So there's a lot of progress. There's a lot of opportunity for young minds, young kids to get into a college, not on the backs of a soccer or football or a hockey scholarship, but a Overwatch, a League of Legends, CSGO scholarship, which is really interesting to see. And I'm also curious from that standpoint, how is it helping college kids develop their skills outside of esports? Do you see any parallels with developing teamwork or communication with esports and collegiate athletes?
Oh, definitely. I believe it's so imperative to have so many people of diverse skills to be a part of it, because there's multimedia, there's marketing, there's sales and sponsorships, but then there's also this strict sports management, coaching, and professionalism needed as just players to really build an esports department. So when you're talking about just players, I mean, there's so many individuals that it takes to build these departments. We're working closely with Wichita State as well as a lot of the schools in Kansas, and to see them grow, they've slowly add on those skills that they need, and it benefits them so greatly in the long run.
Yeah. I think that's something that's really important. It's something that I'm really passionate about, is developing skills both in-game and out of game. And I think that's something that working with collegiate organizers and bodies really focuses on, particularly in the collegiate area, because they're so focused on learning and education that they tie a lot of parallels together with that. Tell me, what's with all the excitement and everything with collegiate and semi-pro, you've obviously ran a number of events. You've been to a number of events and done that whole thing. Tell me, what's been one of the worst moments for you in esports?
We were discussing. It's definitely hard to nail down where your worst spot is, because it's always difficult to acknowledge your bad side. But I mean, it's so important to do so, and I think one of the hardest struggles we have, I think, in esports is maybe a lack of vision or a lack of imagination. The difference between esports and traditional sports right now is traditional sports have so many years to back it up. They have experience. They know how it needs to be ran and what needs to be done. Esports is Wild West. Nobody knows what they're doing. It's kind of like we're building the template as we go. And that lack of imagination is the only thing stopping us. If we could get over that, I think we could have so much more potential. And as we build more tournaments, we always imagine more. So I can't say that we're not, working against it. But if we could get over that, I think that's the worst part of esports at the moment.
Yeah, and it kind of goes into the sentiment of, fixing the ship while you're sailing it kind of thing. You're kind of learning as you go, like you said, and you really learn a lot from your failures more so than your successes, I think. And there's a lot to learn from that and a lot to take away from that, not just in collegiate, but in all aspects of life. Now, transitioning a little bit, tell me a little bit about one of the biggest accomplishments you've had so far. Obviously, you've run a number of events. You've been involved in this for a while. Tell me something that really sticks out to you as a memorable moment so far in esports.
So far, we've had a number of events, like you said, and just watching them grow is by far one of the best motivation pieces, just kind of keeping us going. It's, undeniable. Kind of everywhere you go, esports is growing. When you see a tournament that went from 100 people, and then there's a couple hundred, now there's 500, now we're going over 1,000 people coming out to these events, and now multi-thousands of people. I think that's the best part, is when you're sitting in the stadium or when you're sitting in the audience and you can see the potential, but then you see the realized potential as well. It's incredible. You got to see teams come out, and now next year they had a logo. And the next year they actually have jerseys, and now they're sponsored, fully scholarship paid for their college teams, and the university is covering their bill. That is incredible to see. That slow growth, but consistent growth. It's amazing.
That's great, and I really recognize that, this whole show and the premise of this podcast that I'm doing is the synthesis of what makes esports so exciting. It's bringing on guests like yourself who are in it day in, day out, who really have a lot of excitement and passion for this. Other than what we said, is there anything that stands out to you of, what makes esports so exciting? We've mentioned a lot of it already, and just the pure passion and the visceralness, if that's a word, of esports, and it just being so, kind of intangible, but also, mesmerizing in a way. When I look at young kids playing the game, they're so focused, they're so into it that you could, clap your hands right next to them. They wouldn't, they wouldn't even look the other way. What makes esports such an exciting sport?
Definitely, watching those players is incredible. You really get to sit and see them develop their skills, kind of like I was saying a little bit about them being able to kind of grow as players. But there's those moments where you're sitting in the tournament, you're sitting in the stadium, and the hush comes across the entire crowd because these two teams that are up on stage are going head-to-head, and they're evenly matched. They're ready to take out the other team at a moment's notice as soon as that first mistake happens, and everybody's waiting to see them perform perfectly or make that mistake and maybe capitalize on the other team's mistake. And there's that split second when there's a big team fight or big action getting ready to happen in the match. And as you're waiting, and the first player that makes the mistake, and then everybody jumps on it, and the crowd goes wild. I mean, it's the excitement that grows from being able to see the competitive at its very top skill go at each other. I think that's incredible. You have all that background knowledge to understand what they're doing as far as their strategies, and the fact that I would never be able to execute like they do, but the fact that you get to watch them do it. And it's not just about being able to do that execution. It's about being able to do it on stage during the tournament. You only have one chance, and if you mess up, that could be $6 million in some cases. And so I think that's incredible.
Now, do you see that the audience at these events is being a collegiate and working with the collegiate efforts? Do you see that there's students, or do you see that there's attendees that come to these things that maybe don't have a strong background in the games that are being played, but they see flyers around campus or around the town? Do you see that there's other people flowing into these things, or is it primarily like, people who play the game maybe, casually or something like that?
Actually, it's great that you note that. At our last convention, the Wichita Esports Convention 2017, we actually broke that barrier of having more spectators than we did players in our tournaments. So we ended up getting just over 50% spectators to come to watch, to come, maybe they're coming for the vendors or the virtual reality, but they're also there to watch that tournament. And that's incredible to see it become a sport where we're going to fill the stadium of spectators that are coming to watch the skill. I think it's incredible.
Now, tell me a little bit about the conventions that you guys run. I know that, from looking around on the internet, you guys do a little bit of technology as well. There's a kind of a marrying of technology and video games and a kind of entrepreneurship and kind of fostering that community. Is that right?
Oh, definitely. I think that's one of the things that we try to focus on. Teams need to develop themselves as businesses, but we also try to rely on game development competitions, seeing where that potential is here locally, as well as kind of being able to collaborate with them. It's amazing to see what people can do in game jams over a weekend, and then being able to participate in the community vote when they're done. I think we had 12 video games made last event, and that's all going on side of the tournaments. You have artists coming out who they're in love with video games and that they're producing fan art for that, and so you kind of get to pick that up. Really, we're in an awkward stage with semi-professional and collegiate esports, I think, where there's not enough fans for two teams to come out and the entire crowd to come just for those two teams and watch a match like maybe basketball or traditional sports would do right now. So our idea is to bring a convention and kind of have that entire experience. So you walk through and you're not just a gamer, you're a fan at that point, because there's so much going on that you can take part in.
I think that's really important, and I think in order for esports to grow to a wider audience, I think you're exactly right. I think it needs to have wider adoption at these events, such as VR or other things in technology that draw people in that are maybe more widely adopted, and not just vendors either, not just people looking to, sell their T-shirts or controllers or stuff like that. Actual people who are just there to, give entertainment. Maybe it's a PlayStation booth and they just set up VR games for people to play while they're at the convention and things like that. When's the next convention for you guys, or when's the next big event for you guys?
So we are actually working on both our next events coming up. XPO Game Festival is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, October 13th through the 15th. That is coming up fairly soon, and we're going to have great tournaments for League of Legends, Overwatch, and a few other video games. Then we're going to be back in Wichita, Kansas, February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th for our Wichita Esports Convention. So that's what we kind of have in the works and what we're planning on now.
Awesome. For all the listeners in the Kansas or Wichita area, definitely check that out. We'll link everything in the show notes and make sure all the dates get out there for everything so everybody is well aware of it. Now, this is the part of the show I call the 5-question combo breaker. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. And just, first thing that comes to mind, rattle off what you think. First one is best advice someone has ever given you, life or, sports or anything otherwise.
I think this works pretty much in every case. Don't talk, do.
Awesome. What do you think the esports industry needs to continue to grow and be successful?
I really think it needs a strong semi-professional sector. Right now, as a college student, if you graduate, do you hop on a professional team immediately? What kind of happens to those players who are, not ready to be on cloud nine, but they still have some skill that they could show off or even make money on? I think that's definitely the biggest thing that we need to grow as a community.
Best play you've ever seen, and as far as like esports games go, or the most memorable moment for you in esports?
We were talking about this, and the $6 million Echo Slam in the Dota 2 tournament, by far the best thing to watch or to be a part of.
Share a valuable resource that's been beneficial to you in your career.
We started off with 6 advisors, and they have been crucial to our success. We don't necessarily take everything that they say to heart, but their advice is invaluable.
What's one daily habit that's been the biggest factor to your success?
Almost everybody in the group actually participates in this. Every morning when we wake up, esports news is our biggest interest. That's what we wake up, and that's our biggest excitement for the day. When we hear about the Overwatch League or some of these things coming out, CLG just got bought out by Madison Square Garden. That's amazing.
Right.
That's what we live for, and I think that's kind of what keeps us in the know. That's what keeps us growing.
Now, I just want to close with a couple things. First, I would love to hear from your perspective on what it takes to be successful in esports. And you can share from a CEO perspective and having an esports startup, or from a collegiate standpoint. If you have any perspective on what it takes to be successful, share that with the listeners now. I think that would be really valuable.
By far, consistency outweighs almost everything else. If you're going to do good work and only a couple days a week, then it's not going to cut it. You have to be there every day in the trenches. And not to say that we don't do good work, but consistent work is more important. If you're there every day and you're continuing to grow and you don't stop, that's what you're going to do to overcome your failures. You will have failures. It's about being able to turn around and continue after those.
Awesome. Now, lastly, I just want to have you share, if anyone wants to engage with you online or interact with you, is there any place that you prefer people engage with you or chat with you?
Definitely. Please contact us at twitter.com at Wichita Esports. That's our most active form of communication. Or definitely even Ramsey Jamoul, if they want to reach out to me personally as well.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you again, Ramsey, for coming on the show. It's been great talking with you. I know we'll have to have you on the show again to talk more about the collegiate aspect of it and things like that. I think that would be really awesome for people to take in. And I just want to just thank all the listeners. Thank you, everybody, for listening in on the show. And with that, just want to remind everyone that if this all goes as planned, this show is just the beginning. Thank you, listeners. I really appreciate you. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating on iTunes. I would love a 5-star, but if you think I deserve a 1, let me have it and tell me why.